sentencing because it ties their hands, as they say over and over again in sentencing transcripts. It totally takes away their power to do what they were appointed to do, which is, on the merits of the case, decide what the appropriate sentence should be.
They're taking away the discretion, which brings up all of this mandatory minimum stuff, which is truly harmful, probably a hateful policy. But our Congress people are showing that they're tough on crime.
The intention originally of mandatory minimum sentencing was to try and leave a little less discretion to the judges throughout the country, and from at least a federal standpoint, to try and make it a little more uniform in terms of the time that one would spend.
And where does President Bill Clinton stand on mandatory minimum sentences? Here's what he had to say during an MTV political forum.
By and large, there have been a lot of problems with mandatory sentencing programs related to drugs, because they tend to treat cases that are different the same. The system is not as rational as it ought to be, and I do think there's some problems with the sentencing.
I'm not saying not to punish me by any means, but let's make it reasonable. Third-time child molesters and rapists are getting out before I'm supposed to be getting out in 10 years. Probably the hardest thing about being in prison is the lack of human camaraderie. The emotional and psychological damage is pretty hard to explain unless you've actually been through it. When you're doing 10 or 15 years at a pop, you can't think about, oh, you know, I got 10 more years to do, because it's just, who can deal with that?
Before we take a break, a quick word about another psychoactive drug called MDMA, or ecstasy, which has been all the rage for some years now at rave parties. Ecstasy is actually an amphetamine derivative, and while its effects seem more benign than those of LSD, creating a heightened feeling of empathy and closeness with other people, doctors now believe that MDMA may in fact create permanent brain damage, a possibility worth pondering out there in dance land. When we return, we'll take a look at one of the most insidious drugs in the human pharmacopoeia, heroin. Don't go away.